Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Did you hear that? Did you hear what just came out of that man's mouth? That was not some Reddit warrior in his mama's basement. That was not some talking head on sports television getting paid to manufacture controversy for ratings. That was Malik Collins, a starting defensive lineman for the Cleveland Browns, sitting across from a five-time Pro Bowler on a nationally distributed podcast, telling the whole world that he likes Shedeur Sanders' swag, the confidence, the presence. And he said it with his whole chest while Deshaun Watson's name was still warm in the room. Welcome to Dre Reports. I'm your host, Dre Fiver, and today we are going deep into the most chaotic quarterback situation in the entire NFL. And trust me, that is saying something in a league that also has the New York Jets existing. Buckle up, dog pound. This one is a full breakdown, and I am not pulling a single punch. Let's set the scene for people who might be a little behind. The Cleveland Browns entered the 2026 offseason with a quarterback room that looks less like a competition and more like an episode of Survivor. You've got Deshaun Watson, the man attached to the most criticized trade in NFL history, a $230 million fully guaranteed albatross still draped around this franchise's neck, returning from his second Achilles rupture. You read that right, 2 Achilles tears. The man has not played a meaningful snap since October of 2024. Watson last played in the 2024 season, going 1-6 before tearing his Achilles and then ruptured it again in January 2025, forcing him to miss the entire last season. Then, you've got Shedeur Sanders, the 5th-round rookie who was handed the keys to a burning car last November and somehow managed to not completely wreck it. And rounding out the room, you've got Dillon Gabriel and rookie Dillon Green, who are essentially just scenery at this point. Now enter Todd Monkin, new head coach, first time calling the shots as the top guy. Offensive mind. Smart, sharp, and fully aware that this quarterback decision is the defining moment of his entire tenure before it even gets started. Monkin came in talking tough. Open competition, best man wins. Nobody has the job handed to them. Browns fans loved that energy. After years of what felt like organizational loyalty to Watson that bordered on institutional stubbornness, hearing a coach talk straight felt like a glass of cold water in the desert. And for a few weeks, everything was fine. Then a report dropped from the Cleveland beat, and the whole dog pound went nuclear. According to veteran Browns beat reporter Mary Kay Cabot, Watson currently holds the edge over Sanders in the competition, a surprising turn after Sanders had appeared to be the frontrunner just 3 weeks earlier. Now let me be clear about something. Cabot is a respected beat reporter with decades of experience covering this franchise. I am not here to throw mud at her personally, but the timing, the framing, and the sourcing of this report set off every alarm bell a Browns fan has. Because what exactly is this edge based on? The Browns held a 3-day voluntary minicamp shortly before the 2026 NFL Draft, and at the one practice open to the media, Watson led the quarterback rotation in most drills. 3 days. Voluntary, unpadded. No contact. Guys in shorts and helmets throwing routes against air. And from that, we are supposed to conclude that the man who has not played a real football game in almost 2 years is pulling away from a younger quarterback? I'm sorry, but Dre Fiver does not buy that. And, apparently, neither does Todd Monkin. Because within about 24 hours of that report circulating everywhere, Monkin went on Cleveland radio and pumped the brakes hard. He dismissed the narrative entirely and clarified that he has not decided on the quarterback, stressing that a lot can change in the coming months. He kept it completely real, saying he would love to have a starter identified before training camp, but acknowledged plainly, "I'm not there yet, so I can't say that," pointing out they had only been on the field for 3 practices. He went further than that. He said something that every Browns fan needs to frame on their wall. Monkin explained that his evaluation would continue to evolve, saying, "It's always changing based on what you see. I don't have a history with any of our players. They're all external to me. No favorites. No predetermined answer. No thumb on the scale. That is the kind of coach this franchise has needed for years. And if Monkin is being straight with us, this thing is genuinely wide open." But here is where it gets really interesting, because while Monkin was tamping down the Watson hype from the coaching side, one of his own defensive linemen was on a podcast doing the same thing from the locker room side. And that is where Malik Collins walks into this story like the most unexpected plot twist of the entire offseason. Here is what you need to understand about Malik Collins, and why what he said on that podcast matters so much more than the average media take. Collins is not a rookie trying to make the team. He is not a backup with something to prove. He is a starting defensive tackle for the Cleveland Browns who lines up against these quarterbacks in practice every single day. He knows what Shedeur Sanders looks like when the pads come on. He knows what Watson looks like navigating a new offense. And when Terron Armstead, himself a 5-time Pro Bowler who played the game at the highest level, asked Collins about the quarterback competition, the man gave us something real. Collins said he spent time with Watson back in Houston before the trade, so he has first-hand knowledge of what Watson was at his best. He told Armstead directly he was with Deshaun for a stretch in Houston before the trade, he played against him when he was in Dallas, and he saw firsthand how dynamic Watson was in his prime. That is important context. Collins is not dismissing Watson based on no information. He has seen the man operate at Pro Bowl level. He knows the player Watson was. And even with all of that history, when the conversation turned to Shedeur Sanders, something shifted in Collins' energy. Collins told Armstead flat out that he likes Shedeur's swag and the confidence he plays with, contrasting that with Watson being a bit quieter while still acknowledging Watson as a baller. Now I want you to sit with that for a second. A starting defensive lineman, a guy who goes against both of these quarterbacks in practice, specifically called out Shedeur's swagger and confidence as noteworthy traits. He did not say Shedeur throws a prettier ball. He did not say Shedeur knows the playbook better. He said swag, confidence. And in the NFL, those two things matter enormously when you are talking about a quarterback's ability to control a huddle, manage a game under pressure, and get your teammates to believe they can win. Collins also made it abundantly clear where he stands on the competition itself. He said, "Let the best man win in that situation," and confirmed that in his understanding, this is still an open race. That is a teammate indirectly pushing back against the Watson narrative being force-fed to us through the media. He is telling you with a smile on his face that nobody inside that building has coronated Deshaun Watson as anything, and that should make every single person in the dog pound feel at least a little bit better going into OTAs. Now let me give you the Dre Fiver personal take here, because that is what you come to this channel for. I am not going to pretend to be neutral on this. Watson has had every possible advantage in Cleveland and has consistently failed to capitalize. The Browns sent 4 picks, 3 of them first-rounders, and a third-rounder to Houston for this man, then handed him a $230 million fully guaranteed deal. Let me put that number in perspective for you. $230 million, fully guaranteed. That means when Watson tears his Achilles, tears it again, gets suspended, and goes 1-6 in the games he actually plays, the Browns are still on the hook for every single penny. That is the financial equivalent of buying a Ferrari, immediately driving it into a lake, and then being billed for the lake cleanup. Now let us talk about what Shedeur Sanders actually showed us last season before some people try to rewrite history. Yes, his numbers were not going to win any Rookie of the Year trophies. As a 5th-round pick, Sanders finished his rookie season as the Browns starter, completing 56.6% of his passes for 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions while Cleveland went 3-4 in his starts. 3-4. That is not world-beating. But let me ask you something. What was the offensive line doing in those games? What did the receiving corps look like? What play calling was he operating under? The answer to all of those questions is not good enough, and Sanders still found ways to keep the Browns competitive in most of those contests. Reporters and analysts who covered those games noted that the offense felt genuinely different with Sanders under center. There was a sense that the team was not completely out of games when he was directing traffic, a feeling that had been largely absent from this franchise for a long time. And that aligns perfectly with what Malik Collins is telling us from inside the building. The swag Collins described is not just a personality quirk. It translates to fourth-quarter belief. It translates to guys running their routes knowing the quarterback trusts them and they trust him back. You cannot put a stat line on that. Now let us talk about what this offseason has actually done to set Shedeur up for success, because the Browns front office has been busy. The Browns selected Utah tackle Spencer Fano at number 9 overall, Texas A&M receiver Casey Concepcion at number 24, and Washington's Denzel Boston at number 39, injecting speed and size into a receiving corps that had lacked explosiveness all of last season. Spencer Fano at 9 overall. That is a cornerstone offensive line investment that says clearly to the world, we are building this offense around our quarterback's longevity. Concepcion and Boston give whoever wins the starting job legitimate weapons to work with. These are not charity picks to fill out a depth chart. These are weapons. And a young quarterback with weapons and an upgraded offensive line is a fundamentally different proposition than what we saw last November. One of the analysts breaking this down in the Cleveland media circle made a point that deserves amplification. The assessment was that Sanders tends to skip the routine play to chase the spectacular, going for the home run when the smart play is a first down gain right in front of him. And that trimming those decisions is the key unlock for his development. The blueprint is simple. Take the layups when they are there, protect the ball, move the chains. And then, when the defense overcommits, burn them deep. If Shedeur Sanders can internalize that discipline and apply it under Todd Monkin's offensive system, we could be looking at a genuine leap in his performance level. The talent was never the question. The discipline and decision-making under pressure have been the project. And a full offseason inside a new system, with a coach who communicates transparently, is exactly the environment where that kind of growth happens. Now let me address the elephant in the room, and that elephant's name is Browns ownership. Because there is a reason fans are not just worried about Deshaun Watson the player, they are worried about the organizational forces that might be pushing Watson into the starting lineup, regardless of what happens on the field. The concern circulating throughout the dog pound is that Monkin's tough talk about an open competition might quietly be undermined by ownership fingerprints on a decision that should be entirely football-based. Veteran NFL reporters have raised questions publicly about whether the Browns' performance-based evaluation of the quarterbacks will genuinely remain free of outside influence. That is a legitimate question. If you are sitting on a $230 million fully guaranteed contract for Watson, the business incentive to start him, even temporarily, even just to justify the investment to yourselves, is enormous. Common sense says that if Watson can walk and throw and operate in shorts, the path of least organizational resistance is to hand him the job and see what happens. But here is why that line of thinking is dangerous for the franchise. If Todd Monkin is not given the freedom to make the purely football-based decision in his first year as a head coach, and Watson goes out there and the offense struggles, which, given that Watson has not played meaningful football since 2024 and has had 2 Achilles tears, is a very real possibility, then what? Then Monkin has burned weeks, maybe months of critical development time for Shedeur Sanders. Then you are back in the same situation this franchise has been in for 4 years, looking around the room, trying to figure out who is actually the quarterback of this team while the season bleeds away underneath you. The more rational framing of the scenario is this. Even if Watson struggles, the Browns can pivot to Sanders with minimal long-term risk. And if Watson proves functional in Monkin's system, Cleveland extracts some return on one of the most criticized trades in league history. That is a reasonable way to look at it. But from where Dre Fiver is sitting, the risk of starting Watson and letting that experiment run too long far outweighs the theoretical upside of him rediscovering the 2020 Texans version of himself. That guy, the dynamic, instinctive make-something-out-of-nothing Watson, has not existed in a meaningful way since before the suspension, before the lawsuits, before the injuries. We are asking an enormous amount of a human being who has been physically and mentally through the ringer to perform like he is fresh off a Pro Bowl season. That is not pessimism. That is just reality. And this is where Malik Collins' words become more than just a podcast soundbite. Collins noted that in his understanding, the competition is genuine and ongoing, saying clearly, "I think they said it is an open competition." He is not saying Watson is out. He is not saying Shedeur has it locked. What he is saying is that the narrative being pushed through certain media circles that Watson has already lapped Sanders in this race does not reflect what is actually happening inside that locker room. The players know what they are seeing. The players know who makes the huddle feel alive. And a defensive lineman who lines up against these guys in practice every single day and who chose to go on a podcast and specifically compliment Shedeur Sanders' swagger and confidence is telling you something real, whether he intends to or not. Let me also give some credit where it is overdue, and that credit goes to Terron Armstead for creating the platform where this conversation happened. The Set has been one of the most underrated football podcasts running right now. And when Armstead got Collins on the May 1st episode, he asked exactly the right questions in exactly the right way to get a real answer. Armstead played the game at an elite level for over a decade. He knows how to talk to players. He knows what questions get past the PR wall and into the actual truth of how these guys feel. And Collins, who to his credit was diplomatic and measured throughout, still managed to let enough truth slip through that the whole football internet took notice. That is good journalism. That is good podcasting. The episode aired May 1st, and the Collins quotes on both Myles Garrett and Shedeur Sanders went viral almost immediately afterward. Now, I also want to address something that a lot of Cleveland analysts have been dancing around and that I think is critically important for Browns fans to think about going into OTAs and mandatory minicamp. There is a very real scenario where Shedeur Sanders is not the starter in Week 1. Watson gets the nod, gets the first-team reps throughout June, walks out of minicamp as the declared QB1, and the season begins with him under center. The question then becomes, How long do you let that ride before reality forces a change? Because history tells us that Watson's availability and performance have both been anything but reliable. In 2024, Watson went 1-6 as the Browns starter before the Achilles injury, completing 63.4% of his passes for 1,148 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions. Those are not numbers that inspire a standing ovation. And if we see a similar or worse performance to open 2026, the pressure to hand the offense to Sanders will become impossible to ignore. From the fan base, from the players, from the analytics, from every direction at once. Monkin addressed this dynamic directly by acknowledging that both quarterbacks will play preseason games and that reps distribution alone does not tell the whole story. He confirmed that OTAs would begin in mid-May and that his final evaluation could shift even after someone has accumulated the majority of first-team work. That is a coach leaving himself every possible door open, and I respect it entirely. This is not a situation where the answer is obvious or where the right decision is easy. But I want to be on record right now saying this clearly. If Todd Monkin is truly evaluating this competition on its merits, and if the player who shows up in OTAs and training camp and preseason games performing at a higher level gets the job, Shedeur Sanders should win this competition. The age is on his side. The upside is on his side. The investments the Browns made on offense this spring are on his side. The full offseason of development in a real system is on his side. And now, apparently, a starting defensive lineman's personal endorsement of his swag and competitive spirit is on his side too. The bottom line here is this. The Cleveland Browns are at the most important decision point of their entire post-Watson era. And the way this quarterback competition resolves is going to define not just the 2026 season, but potentially the next 5 years of this franchise. Todd Monkin walked into a situation most coaches would run from. A poisoned financial commitment to a declining veteran. A promising but raw young quarterback. A fan base that has been emotionally battered for a decade. And ownership, watching every single move with a financial stake in the outcome. He said the right things. He has held his ground publicly. And now, one of his own players, sitting on a podcast with a 5-time Pro Bowler, has independently confirmed that the competition is real, that Shedeur's confidence is real, and that nobody inside that building is treating this thing like a formality. Malik Collins did not have to say what he said. He could have given the standard, "I just play defense, that's not my department," answer, and nobody would have batted an eye. Instead, he told Taron Armstead, and by extension the entire football-watching world, that Shedeur Sanders brings a kind of swagger and confidence that is noticeable, that is valued, and that is different. Coming from a man who was in that huddle last November, who watched Shedeur take over and change the energy of a locker room that had been dead on its feet, that means everything. The Watson narrative is not dead. It is not even close to dead. He still has the experience advantage. He still has organizational financial incentives weighing in his favor. Monkin himself cited Watson's experience, his past success in systems similar to the one Monkin runs, and his showing in that brief media window as reasons the veteran is currently in the conversation. But in football, what happens in shorts and helmets in April means considerably less than what happens in full pads in August, when the intensity is real and the competition gets physical. And when those pads come on, Shedeur Sanders has already proven, in actual NFL games, that he can handle the pressure. Watson has to prove he can handle 2 ruptured Achilles tendons, 2 years of rust, and still play like himself. Those are 2 fundamentally different bars. I know which one I am betting on. And I think Malik Collins just told us, in the most diplomatic way possible, that a significant portion of that Cleveland Browns locker room might be betting on the same guy. This competition is far from over. The real evaluation begins now. And Dre Reports will be here every step of the way to break it all down for you, with no filter and no agenda, just the truth as we see it. If you are locked into this Browns quarterback situation the way I am, smash that like button right now and let the algorithm know we need to get this conversation in front of every Browns fan on this platform. Drop your take in the comments. Are you riding with Shedeur? Are you giving Watson one more shot? Or do you think this whole thing ends in chaos by week 4? I genuinely want to know. And if you are not subscribed to Dre Reports yet, what are you doing with your life? Hit that subscribe button, ring that notification bell, and share this video with every Dog Pound member you know. We are just getting started on this story, and trust me, it is only going to get wilder from here. I'm Dre Fiver. I'll see you on the next one.